Yankee Doodle Dandy. Yankee Doodle do or die. A real live never.
Good afternoon from Mickey and from me from Castle Goring. Mickey and I were in London yesterday. We went to see the most wonderful musical. I cannot tell you how enjoyable it was. It was a workshop. I'll show this. It's the programme, and I will show it at the end as well. It's the James Cagney musical. I'm sure those of you of a certain age will know who James Cagney is, and those of you who are young enough to not know who James Cagney is, let me say, he was a huge star. He was one of the Hollywood greats from the golden age of Hollywood. And this is a faithful evocation of his story, set to the most wonderful music. Absolutely marvellous. The music and lyrics are by Christopher McGovern and Robert Crichton. And Robert Crichton actually took the part of, and wonderful, I mean, he could have been his grandson or son, of Cagney. It's produced by Ricky Kane Lorimer and Kate Edelman Johnson. Now, Kate Edelman Johnson is Hollywood royalty. Her father produced many of the films that James Cagney starred in. One would think that a story about a little Irish guy who makes his way in the world by being honest and by being truthful and by being authentic, to use that ghastly modern word, would not be relevant today. Well, everything is relevant. His story is so relevant, I cannot tell you, because he was one of the hugest stars in Hollywood, but he was typecast as a gangster, and he had a human side. He was actually called up in front of the House Un-American Activities Committee for his sympathies, political sympathies. He didn't suffer any severe consequences, fortunately. He was humane. He had a heart, and he was one of the people who created this liberal world that we all benefit from today. And just to show you that nothing very much changes with the passage of time, he was disaffected about being a star in the way he was a star. He wanted to do worthy films. So he practically bankrupted himself doing worthy films, all of which tanked. And towards the end of his life, he realized that he had actually fulfilled the purpose of his life, which was to be a shining light. Not the way he hoped to be, but he was. It's a wonderfully moving story. He had a wonderful relationship with his mother, wonderful relationship with his wife. The music is to die for. It's so marvellous. Well, it's in a workshop here at the moment. They are hoping to get a theatre in London, and fingers crossed they will, because it's virtually impossible to get a theatre at the moment. Because of COVID, everything is backed up 18 and 24 months. But with a little bit of luck, something will give, and one of the people who own theatres in London will put it on. And if they do, I cannot recommend highly enough going, because it truly is the most enchanting, life-enhancing and wonderful experience. So without further ado, I will now plunge in, starting with eating a bit of humble pie. I will read out one or two comments. The first is from Alexander Buchholz, who says, I saw an interview with Angelina Jolie a few years ago, I believe with Anderson Cooper, in which she said that she donates a third of her income to charitable causes. Alicia says, Angelina Jolie has been seriously involved in any number of global humanitarian efforts for years, has donated millions of dollars as well as a great deal of her own time. She was a UNHCR Goodwill Ambassador and Special Envoy. Personally concentrates efforts for forgotten emergencies in war zones. Personally purchased land to protect endangered species that also include villages, schools, businesses, foundations, and sanctuaries funded solely by herself. Education policies for the UN, G8 and World Bank. CFR Fellow for the Intervention of Child Atrocities. Kids in Need of Defence. UK International Summit to End Sexual Violence in Conflict. Visiting Professor for Postgraduate Work at the London School of Economics. Has received numerous recognitions and awards, and more, including her services to UK foreign policy and campaign against sexual violence in war zones, resulting in an honorary damehood presented to Angelina Jolie by the Queen. And just to wrap it up, Jane Man says, Angelina Jolie alienated the children from Brad Pitt. What does that say about her? Does that not tarnish the reputation she's trying to build as a wonderful person of the world? Well, I stand corrected because Angelina Jolie has clearly put her money where her mouth is. I'm not sure that I would actually accept the claim that she gives a third of her income to charity, because I know that she is not invariably reliable where her word is concerned, because she gave her ex-husband not only her word, but entered into contractual agreement with him when he gave her enough of a percentage of a property they owned in France, a winery, so that they then became 50-50 owners. And it was done with the understanding that if she wanted to sell her shares, she would give him first refusal, and she failed to do so. So I think there are most likely three sides to this story: yours, mine, and the truth. Nevertheless, it is obvious that I did not give credit where it was due, and I stand corrected. However, I do not think that Angelina Jolie is an Audrey Hepburn. I met Audrey Hepburn when she was doing her United Nations work in London. Absolutely delightful woman. She was impeccable, as the French would say. There is a reason why she has shone as a beacon of light, even decades after her death. Both of them were thin, both of them were beautiful, admittedly. Audrey Hepburn was totally naturally beautiful. Angelina Jolie, who is beautiful and would have still been naturally beautiful, did have a nose job. So, let's put it this way, there has been a medical assistance. I'm not decrying that. I'm just saying one was totally natural, the other wasn't, but both have done sterling work. Regrettably, and this shows what happens in life, when you play dirty, some of the mud sticks to you. And this is clearly what has happened with Angelina Jolie. Now, Miss Fish and Chips says, these were words from Diana Donald and they are beautifully expressed. What does Meghan Markle's revelation tell about the royal family? What it tells about the royal family is that a much-loved grandson brought a viper into its midst. But the family was so pleased that he had at last found someone prepared to share his royal life. It welcomed her with open arms. It gave her a wedding to die for. It gave her a title, unlimited clothes allowance, a lovely home in a peaceful part of a gorgeous park, Windsor Great Park. It offered her opportunities that were limitless and gave her patronages which were carefully chosen to suit her skills and her ethnicity. She then dumped on the family from a mighty height, and still it has not chastised her or turned its back on her. Still she is, quote unquote, a much loved part of the family. It tells me that the British royal family and its head, Queen Elizabeth II, are far more charitable than I could ever be and far more Christian. I just thought I'd read that out because it has been sent to me and I think it says it all, and it means that people out there have got the message that the way the royal family is dealing with the Meghan and Harry problem, which of course is a problem that emanated from Meghan, is in a truly Christian way. Have to tell you, far more Christian than I would be in their shoes. And I will make one or two observations. Meghan evidently wanted Frogmore House. Frogmore House used to be Queen Victoria's mother's residence. She wanted Frogmore House, and she was, according to my information, absolutely furious to be given Frogmore Cottage. Of course, when Grand Duchess Ksenia of Russia got Frogmore Cottage, she was appreciative. But who was she? The sister, daughter, granddaughter, great-granddaughter, great-great-granddaughter, etc. of emperors, a member of the richest and grandest royal family on earth until the revolution. Because make no mistake about it, the Russian imperial family was far grander and far richer than even the British royal family. To her, Frogmore Cottage was good enough. To Meghan Markle, no, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. Well, this leads me to Hillsdon's comment. Hell is the place where you have nothing to do but enjoy yourself. This is a variation on a quote that George Bernard Shaw wrote which goes as follows. Here there is no hope, and consequently no duty, no work, nothing to be gained by praying, nothing to be lost by doing what you like. Hell, in short, is a place where you have nothing to do but amuse yourself. This is a little bit heavy, but you can bear with me, otherwise skip over, because we're coming on to the more juicy stuff in a second. But I just couldn't resist making the point. When my children were growing up, I used to say to them, try to find something in life that you like doing, because work that you enjoy turns out to be one of life's great pleasures. Not that you're always going to enjoy it, and not that it's always going to be a pleasure, but a life dedicated to pleasure becomes very hard work indeed. And the end, you only need to look at your grandmother to see what the outcome is going to be. I used to use my mother as a terrible warning, not only to myself, but to my children. A life dedicated to pleasure is a life that damns the person to a lifetime and an eternity of pain. You know, the Duchess of Kent, who is very religious, once made the observation that she had seen more joy amongst the poor in India than she saw anywhere in the Western world. So that tells you, and it's a very valid point. I have seen that as well. I remember as a child when Jamaicans were dirt poor, the fineness of many of the people, the nobility, the dignity, the self-respect that oozed out of them. A life well lived amidst adversity is infinitely more worthwhile and ultimately fulfilling than a life lived with false values. You know, there's a reason why the Age of Enlightenment in the 18th century came into being. To a large extent, it was unintentionally created by Louis XIV, depriving the nobility of their powers, forcing them to congregate at Versailles, where they had utterly meaningless and aimless lives, pursuing amusement and pettiness. Ennui was well known in the 18th century, and in fact, even in Jamaica when I was growing up amongst the upper classes, ennui was a huge problem, because people who had nothing to do but amuse themselves, ultimately life, it sucked the spirit out of them, and life ultimately became meaningless. I would suggest anybody who wants to know what ennui is all about reads the memoirs of Madame du Deffand. She was a famous saloniste in 18th century France. She suffered from ennui. Half the people did. Released from doing anything but amusing themselves, boredom setting in a major way, and with boredom comes creativity. So the spark of ideas. What is the point of life? That was the basis of the Age of Enlightenment, the philosophy that came out of this desert dedicated to amusement, meant that people searched for meaning, not always finding it where it would or naturally should exist. I make that point again for what it's worth. Because the fact of the matter is, and I'm going to finish in a second because this is starting to sound like a religious sermon, at least to me it is, and I want to get off the subject before I bore you to death. But I'm just going to wrap up the point by saying that the human being is an animal, and we were born to struggle to survive. It makes it interesting and exciting. Without a struggle to survive in one way or another, life becomes a desert. People who struggle to survive and succeed in doing so, and I'm not, by the way, deifying deprivation. I'm simply pointing out that deprivation has merits where idleness does not. I just make that point for what it's worth. Meghan says the point of life isn't to survive but to thrive. She's wrong. The point of life is to survive, and survive well. You can only thrive some of the time. An aim of surviving all of the time, of flourishing. It's greed. It is a perversion of the reality and the true purpose of life. It is a paean to not only in self-indulgence and being a spoiled brat, but to all of the emptiness that comes with being a spoiled brat. So, M.L. Wessel says, just read that Ms. Liar Pants on Fire Meghan Markle is actually 44 years old. 3 exclamation marks. Can you confirm this with your impeccable sources? Gorgeous, gorgeous, Lady Colin. Mwah! Thank you. Love you from Canada. 5 exclamation marks. Oh dear. Well, regrettably, the time difference between Britain and California is such that the person I have phoned who would be able to clear up the mystery once and for all has not been able to, because I can't reach them. But I thought it doesn't really matter, because whether Meghan is 40 or 44, the fact remains that this nugget has come from Meghan's statements to the court. Evidently, she asserted in her statements to the court that she is 13 years younger than the 57-year-old Samantha Markle. Do the math, she's 44. Did she make a mistake? How can you make a mistake about your age? How can you make a mistake about the age difference between yourself and your elder half-sister. If you did make a mistake, you're either shockingly bad on maths, which she cannot be, because she evidently has a bloodhound nose for figures where money is concerned. And if she can add up $200,000 and $200,000 makes 400,000, multiplied by 10 makes 4 million. So let me see, that's 4 hours of work. That's $1 million an hour. God. I mean, am I Elizabeth Taylor? Am I just gonna do something for $1 million? I mean, really? I mean, honestly, come on, you know. I'm classy. No. She knows how to do the math where money's concerned, but she doesn't know how to do the math where her age is concerned. Could it be that she is truly disturbed to such an extent that she has such a slender grasp on reality that her age and the age difference between herself and her sister will vary depending on her mood? Do you see why I haven't actually been so perturbed about not being able to get in touch with the person? Because whether she is 40 or 44, the mere fact that she would tell the court something that is clearly either untrue or is the truth, which contradicts an earlier untruth, means that no matter whether we have her coming or going, it's a no-no. Pause of Friendship says, I read today that they are going to be offering financial education. I was so excited to find out that the 37-year-old that publicly whined that his dad cut him off financially will be offering investment advice. Lady C, will you be seeking their services on how to invest your money? In brackets, extreme sarcasm. I think it's very witty. Well, Mickey, wake up. Mickey, wake up. Get in touch with Harry and Meghan in California. I want to know how to invest some money. I need to make $10 million in the next 20 minutes. And they're going to be able to tell me. Oh, also, Mickey, while you're at it, can you please tell them, or you tell the butler, or maybe one of their footmen, or maybe one of their maids, or maybe one of their nannies. Now, who's the nanny taking care of, you ask? Is it Lilibet? Is it Archie? Is it Harry? Or is it Meghan? Or is it all four? Well, Mickey, don't ask awkward questions. This is a serious matter. Come on. You need to ring up California. I need to know. What should I invest in? I need the benefit of their brilliant advice. K. Day says, an expert on jobs, banking, mental health, military, children, charity, environment, and of course the USA Constitution and its First Amendment. I didn't know better. If I didn't know better, I'd think he is the long-awaited Messiah. And there, my dear KD, you have hit the nail on the head. We have two messiahs for the price of one. We have the demigod H, or has been, and we have the demigoddess never was. Oh, sorry, Meghan. They are right up there with the Delphic Oracle. And yes, they are messiahs. And in fact, I'm so far slightly sending up the situation, but now I'm going to be serious. My information, according to the people I have spoken to who are medical experts, who have been guiding me, is that they do have messiah complexes. This is one of the indications that we are dealing with people who are sadly very disturbed. Sadly. Now, sickness is something that everybody should have compassion for. So I think we can be compassionate, but also don't ask advice from a lunatic. They're going to mislead you because they're not in touch with reality. It is inevitable that at some point they're going to trip you up. And in the meantime, they're busy tripping themselves up. Beth Garrow says, if people quit Harry's advice, their next job interview will be interesting. Quotes, why did you leave your former job? Quotes, it didn't bring me joy. And there's the end of this comment. No hope of getting that job. Absolutely no hope of getting the job. Can you imagine an employer interviewing a potential employee and being given a sob story and a hard luck story when every fool, except of course deluded fools who are out of touch with the realities of life, fools who've never had to work, know that no matter what job you have, you can't like it all the time. But he's suggesting to people, if it's going to upset you, or as he puts it, the mental health, because it's interesting. I've noticed Harry, Meghan and a whole load of other people nowadays use mental health, where previously you would have used self-indulgence, where previously you would have said, this upsets me, or this annoys me, or, I find this distasteful and I don't like it. But basically, you're whining because you're a spoiled brat. Nowadays, it's your mental health. Anybody who has any opposition, oh, Mickey's sleeping, she's dreaming. Anybody nowadays who has any opposition finds that the perfectly valid opposition is affecting their mental health. Because we live in a world where these false prophets are telling us that pain, discomfort, displeasure are not natural parts of life to be accommodated and coped with, but that they are inconveniences at best, to be avoided and to be used to increase one's victim status. Madness. Blue Sapphire says, if Harry were to really care about people in thankless jobs they hate and are making them miserable, he would advise them to seek help, not to quit. A bad situation can be made tolerable if you have the coping mechanisms to do so. Isn't that the appropriate mental health advice to give? Seek help. But if not taking the mental health approach, then take the business-like approach, which is to never quit before you have another job to take the current job's place. However, since he did quit his job, such as it was, he's trying to justify the unjustifiable. He knows he did wrong, but he wants to cover it up in a massive self-indulgent rationalization. I pity the poor people who are still beguiled by him because the pearls of wisdom coming out of his mouth will only lead them to ruin. I'm going to read out a few other comments that I think really show how the public has taken to this debate. Because, you know, people have found the whole thing extremely offensive, and one can hardly blame them. Because who does this pipsqueak think he is, setting himself up as an expert on mental health and giving advice from the vantage point of never having had a job, never having needed money, never having been deprived of anything except, sadly, his mother's life when he was 13, 2 weeks shy of his 13th birthday. Tammy Cervantes says, Nutmeg tells her friends to mentor 40 women getting back to work, and Harry tells people to quit their jobs. What a bunch of mixed nuts. Aren't they just? I couldn't agree more. And Emma Stewardson, and incidentally, Emma Stewardson, if you're the Emma Stewardson who I think you are, hello. Harry's message is so irresponsible. The norm is we all have to work, and encourage people to chuck it in is a disrespectful suggestion from a half-witted Burke. Probably 90% of us who have to work are not in a financial position to stop, and not in a position to choose what we do. As for Sarah Ferguson, her comments are pathetic. Where is her responsibility for vulgar, inelegant, and embarrassing behavior? She used to hang out sometimes where I used to hang out, and help! She was loud and excruciatingly over-laddish. If you are who I think you are, you speak from experience, my dear. Vanya Misevich said, Harry thinks we can all be independent. Sorry. Harry thinks we can all be financially independent by talking about charity and lecturing people on the true meaning of life. Surely that is something everybody can do. It doesn't matter whether you are a prince or not. No, not at all. Harry has achieved all this on his own merits. We can all go to Netflix and ask for $100 million to tell people to quit their jobs. Yes, well, that's about it, isn't it? Content. This is all about content. Harry and Meghan need to produce content, endless content, to be in the news on a daily basis. Their ambition, I have said it before and I'm going to say it again, is to become the most talked about couple on earth. Her ambition, I was told when I was writing the book Meghan and Harry, The Real Story, was to become the most talked about and famous woman on earth. She's achieving it. She's achieving it. She's not there yet, but she is achieving it. The only thing is she forgot the word in front of famous, because she's not going to be the most famous woman on earth. She might, however, end up being the most infamous. And I think we should now skip, because I have a lot of other stuff to cover, and I'm going to skip some of the other comments to get down to the really juicy, nitty-gritty bits. Anne Malcolm says, Lady C, greetings from California. Please compare and contrast when leaving royalty for a private life, what it looks like, by comparing the hazmats and Princess Mako of Japan. Well, chalk and cheese, black and white, horses and donkeys. Princess Mako of Japan has left the imperial family in Japan. She's moved to the United States. She's leading a purely private life. She's not hawking her wares. She declined a payoff from the Japanese state, quite unlike other people we know who were, Daddy's not giving me any money. Daddy's not giving me any money. Why is Daddy not giving me money? I need money. Daddy's a mean daddy. There's also, of course, another example that's very current. Princess Madeleine of Sweden. She lives a very quiet, retiring family life with her husband, Christopher O'Neill, in the United States with their beautiful children. He was offered a title, turned it down so that he could continue earning money. Notice he didn't take the title and then scarp her, which Harry and Meghan did. Let's just make that point for what it's worth. Because Harry didn't have to accept that dukedom. Meghan didn't have to tell everybody in the family, and indeed in the world, that she was eager to be a part of the team. Eager to be a part of the team. Until the wedding ring was on her finger. At which point, the mask dropped and they discovered that she had never intended to be a part of the team. Meghan doesn't intend to be a part of any team, according to people who know her well. Meghan's only team is Team Meghan. The Campbells are coming, hurrah, hurrah, says Lady C. The BBC has just announced they'll be airing a 3-part series starting on Boxing Day about the scandalous divorce of your parents-in-law. Were you involved in the making of the series? And if not, why not? It is well known that you and Duchess Margaret's son Brian Sweeney were the closest family members to her. Yes, a very British scandal is going to be aired from Boxing Day evening over 3 days. It is about the divorce of my parents-in-law, well, my father-in-law and my stepmother-in-law, Margaret. Was I involved? No. Before Brian died, we were actually talking about this. I mean, we've been talking about it time and again, because when the book upon which it was written came out, we also compared notes, because Lindsay Spence, who wrote the book, never got in touch with me, never got in touch with Brian, never got in touch with Frances Rutland, Margaret's daughter, You can just about get that one, because it's well known that Margaret and her mother stopped speaking in the 1960s. But to not speak to her son and the stepdaughter-in-law to whom she was close, and who also didn't only have information from Margaret, but from her sister-in-law Jeannie. So I had information from both sides of the camp, so to speak. Lindsay Spence never got in touch with me. Having said that, the book she wrote was a stab at balancing the what up to then had been an extremely unbalanced story, because there's no doubt that Margaret was seriously victimized by my father-in-law and by the press and by various people as well, because she was very rich and they just plugged in. I can tell you things, unfortunately I can't, because some of them would be seriously legally problematic, about the way people ripped her off. One of these days, though, I will write it down, and when we're all safely gone, if anybody's interested, there will be a record of what was done to her. Disgraceful, some of what people did to her. Just theft, outright theft. My father-in-law was a horrid human being. Charming, but horrid. Now, I never met him. I didn't know him. He died, I think, the year before I met and married my ex-husband. So I never knew him. But I know an awful lot about him from people, especially his daughter, Jeannie, who was my friend. The BBC didn't get in touch with either me or Brian either. Interesting that, isn't it? It tells me they weren't interested in knowing where the truth lay. They were simply interested in going with their narrative. Now, I have been commissioned by one of the publications to write a review, and I will be writing a review. But Sarah Phelps, who is a very, very experienced writer, script writer, she's written many things for the BBC, many things. I'm going to quote what she said. This is the woman who, according to her, had an obsession with Margaret and with righting the wrong, but couldn't get in touch with Brian or me. Very peculiar. Writing the story of Margaret's life and the events leading up to and including her divorce from the Duke has been a passion project of mine since 1993. That's when Margaret died, incidentally, when I first heard her name and started learning about her. Well, right there, let me stop and say, Miss Phelps, Margaret Argyll was, up to the time of her death, one of the most famous people in this country. You hadn't heard her name? Until she died? Or just before she died, because she died in July 1993. What rock were you sheltering under? I feel very strongly that she's been punished for being a woman, for being visible, for refusing to back down, be a good girl and go quietly. This drama is my tribute to her. Well, right there I have to tell you, it tells me that they have a drum they're going to beat, and I'm glad somebody's finally defending Margaret. But she wasn't punished for being a woman. You don't know what you're talking about. She was punished for being rich and perceived as a foreigner. That's why she was punished. And in those days, yes, there was an element of misogyny because men were regarded as more important than women. And certainly people usually went with a duke over a former wife. She wasn't punished for being visible. Who punished her for being visible? Margaret loved being famous. Margaret loved the attention. Brian used to say to her, "Oh, Mummy, please try to keep out of the newspapers." And you see Margaret thinking, are you nuts? There's no way I'm going to keep out of the newspapers. She loved fame. She was a bit of a fame junkie. Yes, the publicity was often untrue and unfair, and it's certainly what happened traumatized her. But what cockamamie rubbish are you coming up with that she was being punished for being visible? And yes, she refused to back down, and there I agree. There was an element of punishment. Be a good girl and go quietly. Excuse me, what, again, unrealistic claptrap is this that you're coming up with? Where was she going to go to? I mean, she was famous. Of course the papers were going to be interested in her. Where was she going to go to and be quiet? I mean, also, what was she supposed to do? Enter a monastery? Or a convent? I mean, give me a break. She also said one or two things which I found interesting. This Sarah Phelps said that Margaret was a regular fixture on the front pages at the time and was famed for her charisma, beauty and style amidst a very chaotic life. This is the covering piece about that, covering some of what Sarah Phelps said. Sarah Phelps, when speaking about the new series, admitted that she thought about another famous duchess when creating the three-part series in the form of Meghan Markle. Excuse me. Margaret was elegant. Margaret was not treacherous. Margaret was a lady. Margaret didn't sell the truth or lies about herself or anybody else to the newspapers. My father-in-law was booted out of White's, the best, supposedly, gentleman's club in England, for selling stories about her to the gutter press. I mean, and she was a regular fixture on the front pages at the time and was famed for her charisma, beauty and style amidst a very chaotic life. She didn't lead a chaotic life. Margaret was one of the most regular and orderly people you could imagine. She got up at the same time every morning, 9 o'clock, whether she'd been to bed at 6 o'clock, 3 o'clock, or 11 o'clock the night before. She got up every morning at 9 o'clock. She had a fixed way of functioning that never altered. She was a picture of regularity. She was anything but chaotic. Yes, drama happened to her, but she was not chaotic. In fact, her obsession with orderliness might well have contributed to strained relations within the family. And more than that, I'm not going to say at this point. I will quote what Sarah Phelps said. I think a lot about Meghan Markle and about how much the press hates her, how much they absolutely go for her all the time compared with Kate Middleton. And there's a kind of prevailing idea that if you're in the public eye, you're fair game, you're meat. If you put yourself out there, you are meat, and if you get bruised, so what? That's your job. Your job is to be ripped apart by us, and that's who I thought a lot about when I was writing this. Well, I'm sorry. First of all, Catherine Cambridge was given a far rougher ride for several years, for longer than Meghan has been in the public arena and known to the general public. Meghan's only been around for about 5 years. Catherine Cambridge, if we cast our mind back as Kate Middleton, spent, I don't remember how many years, 6 or 8 years, being vilified by the press, not only before her marriage, but after her marriage. She could do practically nothing right. She was roundly mocked. And you are comparing, and by the way, she was roundly mocked and never retaliated and never begged for pity, and just continued in her dignified way going about her life. And you're trying to compare her, the fact that she now gets better publicity, with Meghan Markle, whose adverse publicity has almost entirely been due to her reprehensible conduct. Yes, she is right, incidentally, this Sarah Phelps woman, that there's a prevailing idea if you're in the public eye, you're fair game, you're meat. I know that only too well. I have 45 years of abuse behind me. I know that only too well. If you're out there, you are meat, and if you get bruised, so what? That's your job. Certainly you're right there, because the BBC and ITV and a lot of the tabloids regard us as dehumanized creatures. I've always said it. First of all, they dehumanize you, then they abuse you. And they've been doing it to me for 45 years. They do it to everybody up to a point. It's not a pretty sight, but you learn to live with it until their conduct becomes so abusive that you have no choice but to take legal action. Then your job is to be ripped apart by us. Yes, you're right. That's our job. That's our job. It's my job. It's Catherine Cambridge's job. It was Margaret Argyll's job. It's Meghan Markle's job. The difference between Catherine Cambridge, Margaret Argyll, and I, and Meghan Markle, is that the first 3 of us did nothing to invite the abuse that we received. Meghan Markle has received abuse that she not only invited, but has aggravated deliberately. to wrap up what she said, that was what I found really interesting about trying to understand her as a person. If you look at photographs of her and she is not photogenic, you would look at her and think she doesn't look like she's massively impressive as a person. She just looks like a woman in a dress and a certain period of time. There's a difference in the period in the sense that at that period of time, she was the height of class, fashion, beauty, and interest. Everyone was fascinated by her. Yes, people were, and I've got news for you. She wasn't unphotogenic. You obviously don't realise, dear girl, that smiling is a recent thing. When I was younger, we were all brought up to never smile for the cameras. One didn't pose. This whole business of, look at me, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up, is trim Meghan Markle. And it's something that, to an extent, most of us do nowadays. As Diana said, slap on a smile. But that is an 80s and 90s and 21st century phenomenon. Margaret died in 1993. You never smiled. So it's not that she wasn't photogenic. It's that she looked severe because it was infra-dig to lower yourself, to acknowledge people and do something that you wouldn't ordinarily have been doing. And it was infra-dig to be posing. I will hold fire on this till I see what they say, but I will tell you, I already know that they've got one thing dramatically wrong. Margaret only ever had 3 hairstyles in the whole of her life. Claire Foy could have replicated Margaret's, not childhood hairstyle obviously, but her early youth hairstyle into her 40s, and then her hairstyle after her 40s to her death. She didn't. Is it not truly extraordinary that they make a film about one of the great beauties and fashion plates of her time, and they don't even get the characteristic hairstyle right? Well, I suppose it makes sense in the world we live in. Anne Boleyn is black. What? They're going to do a film about Jean Harlow and she's a brown-haired man? The whole thing is just, it just misses. But I look forward to seeing the finished product, because judging off the content of the book and the fact that they are defending Margaret, I will be very interested to see what they say. Having said all of that, they weren't interested in the truth. They can't have been. They never bothered to get in touch with Brian or me. And on that note, I'll say thank you very much for listening. I hope this has been of some interest to you. If it has, please like, share, subscribe, press the notification bell, and please keep the questions coming in. This can't be done without you. God bless and goodbye.